talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody, to the rare, we're just all over the place this week. It is a little bit of an Aaron Torres pod, college football betting pod hybrid show, okay? I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. Transparently, it's been a crazy week. It's been a good week. I've been traveling. Obviously, we did the Sunday reaction show, and normally for people who are super tied into the Torres ecosystem, we do a Tuesday show, and then we do a full college football betting show on a separate feed on Wednesday, okay? Well, unfortunately, the travel schedule just did not allow me to do that this week. I'm on the East Coast, was actually at UConn all day on Tuesday with some meetings with some people over there. Can't share too much, but that basketball team's going to be pretty good again. I did watch them practice a little bit. So we're going to be this is a little bit of a hybrid show, okay? We're going to put this on both podcast feeds. So if you are subscribed to both, I apologize. It's just this week. It's just what we're going to do. But I could not get on a plane Thursday when I go back to the West Coast without previewing the best weekend of college football that we have had, not only this year, but listen, I know it feels hyperbolic. It feels like a long time since we've had a weekend quite like this. Okay, Oregon, Ohio State, USC-Penn State, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, all of a sudden a Big 12 title contender against Kansas State in a very important game in that league. So we are breaking all these games down. We're talking about all of them. Drop your comments and your thoughts on these big games in the comments section because I am excited to hear what you have to say. As of right now, we'll do this episode today. Then we hope to have a normal Thursday night show. Remains to be seen, but there is so much going on. Before we get started, please make sure you're subscribed everywhere, okay? The Aaron Torres pod, we do it Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. And, of course, the YouTube channel as well. YouTube closing in on 45,000 subscribers. We appreciate everybody's support. We are not slowing down there. I think we cover college sports as well as anybody. And, oh, by the way, we got a hoop season coming up here, so make sure that you are subscribed there as well. Also worth noting, we have a college football betting podcast feed that is completely separate where we do deep dives on games. That's where it gets a little nerdy. If you want the 8-9 minute breakdown on some of the we're always going to talk the big games, Oklahoma, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State. But sometimes there's smaller games that we'll do more deep dives on those. So make sure you're following college football betting with Aaron Torres, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get those podcasts. By the way, before we get into today's show, do want to welcome back one of our favorite partners in Aaron Torres Media. The college football betting crowd may have not heard this yet, but it is our friends at Callie Puffs, okay? So Callie Puffs, for people who don't know, these are the delicious, healthy alternative to those lousy snacks, those unhealthy snacks that you've been eating all football season long. It is football season. You're on the couch 8, 10, 12 hours a day, Saturday, Sunday, Monday night, Thursday night, and you are looking for something healthy while you're stuffing your face to put in your body, okay? Well, that's where Callie Puffs comes in. They're the alternative to the Doritos, the Fritos, the Lays that you see in your grocery aisle because they are both healthy but delicious as well. Baked, not fried, healthy ingredients. By the way, the founder of the company, a guy named Joey, huge football fan, lives not far from me. He's actually a Rams season ticket holder, attended a game with him not too long ago, but he really kind of was looking for an alternative for him as a football fan, but then also for his kids who wanted to run to the unhealthy part of the snack aisle every time they went to the grocery store. So check out Callie Puffs. You can learn more, CalliePuffs.com. Also worth noting, by the way, they are available on Amazon. Why that's important, I don't know if Prime Day has already passed, Prime Week, Prime Month, whatever it is. Go to Amazon.com. You're already there anyway, shopping for stuff. Throw a few of these in your cart. So thank you to Callie Puffs for being a partner of Aaron Torres Media, the Aaron Torres Pod. And boy, oh boy, This is the snack you need for your college football Saturdays, your NFL Sundays, etc. With that said, listen, we got the craziest week in college football that we have had in a long time, certainly this season. So there is no more time to waste. Let's jump in. Let's get to the topic of the day. And frankly, not only the topic of the day, but how about this? The game of the week. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but maybe the game of the year early, right alongside Alabama, Georgia. I am, of course, talking about Ohio State visiting Oregon. Ohio State, the rare road favorite in a top 3 matchup. They're a 3.5-point favorite. The over-under set at 52.5. And it's funny what I was thinking about this game coming in is that there's so many times when these schedules come out in June and July and we're seeing the dates and we're this and we're that. It's so often that you think a game is going to be something and one team has an injury. One team is disappointing. They lose a game they shouldn't. And it takes away a little bit of the vibe. That has not been the case at all in this game as both these teams come in at 5-0. They are, in my opinion, they have looked like the 2 best teams in the Big Ten. They both have position to get back to Indianapolis where we could see a rematch. They're both in position to potentially get the number 1 or number 2 seed and certainly a first-round bye as the Big Ten champion in the playoff. So let's go ahead and dive in this game. I actually want to start with Ohio State. And I want to start by giving credit to a man that I have not given very much credit to over the years. That is Ryan Day, the Ohio State Buckeyes head coach. By the way, drop your picks and predictions in the chat on YouTube. Curious to see what people think about this game. I want to give Ryan Day credit, man, because listen, I've been critical as anybody, but this team, they have come out 5 games that they should have won, 5, at least 4, even the Iowa game that they should have won in dominant fashion. They destroy the first 4 opponents. And that Iowa game to me was very, very, very impressive. Okay. And when you look at this Ohio State team, when this roster was put together, when this coaching staff was put together, this is what you were kind of expecting. Okay. I'm not ready to say that I didn't come into the year thinking Ryan Day was necessarily quote unquote on the hot seat, but he needed to produce results. He needed to produce a team that was good enough to win a national championship. And I know in previous years, they've been on that brink. We know that 2 seasons ago, if they had beaten Georgia in that college football playoff game, they almost certainly would have won a national championship. But there was a lot of pressure on Ryan Day, and he's put together right up there with Texas, the most complete roster in college football. By the way, Dan Lanning this week said that this is the most complete team that he has seen in a long time. Quote, they have no weaknesses. So you look at them across the board, they have been great. The offense, listen, Will Howard, I've seen RJ Young, another kind of college football analyst guy, say that Will Howard has the easiest job in college football. I don't think he is wrong in saying it, but you have 2 elite running backs in Quinshaw Judkins and Travion Henderson. In that Iowa game, both went for over 60 yards. You have the elite wide receiver core led by Jeremiah Smith. Oh, by the way, Emeka Egbuka, who's quietly kind of just had a very good season. A lot of people haven't talked about him. He played really well against Iowa. The defense is elite. Jim Knowles, I think because of the arrival of Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator, has not gotten enough credit for what he has done. And I just go back to that Iowa game. That was the one game, right? It's funny. We do these college football picks every single week. Last 2 weeks, my best bets have been 10-3 overall against the spread, okay? That I hate to brag, that's an incredible number, but here's the crazy part. Of the 3 losses, 2 of them were games where I was kind of right on top of it, and there was one play in both games that went wrong. The Payton Thorne pick 6 2 weeks ago against Oklahoma. Last week, the Eli Drinkwitz deciding to kick a field goal with 8 seconds left. The only game that I have completely missed on is Iowa-Ohio State, and that is why I really like this team. They dominate Iowa. Listen, 35-7. It looks good on paper. It was even more impressive if you watched it, okay? Ohio State was a 19.5-point favorite. They score on the opening drive. They move the ball at will in the second half for that convincing win. They are playing some great football coming into this game. From the Oregon perspective, let's give them a little bit of credit too. They come into this one 5-0, 2-0 in Big Ten play. And what I would say about Oregon, it's tough to really analyze like statistically what they do well, because for me, it's really been a tale of 2 seasons for the Ducks. You had the first 2 games where they didn't play well. Although transparently, the more Boise State plays, the less I think it had to do with Oregon being bad and Boise State and Ashton Genty maybe just being the best player in college football. He's having like one of those Barry Sanders in 1988 types. He might end up with like 4,000 rushing yards. It's hyperbole. But Oregon couldn't stop him. Nobody could. But since then, they figured it out. They've moved some people around on the O-line, and they're dominating. Destroy Oregon State by 35 on the road. Destroy UCLA in a game that wasn't that close, and really took care of Michigan State last Friday. I don't think it was the perfect game, the perfect performance, the perfect effort. But at the same time, let's call a spade a spade. You know, you're a comfortable favorite. Dillon Gabriel is chucking the ball all over the field, and he is in a situation where he takes care of business and is really rolling with this offense. Again, it took a little bit to get going on this offense, but the run game is now complementing Dillon Gabriel. 100+ yards rushing from Jordan James last week. Oh, by the way, Dillon Gabriel completing like 78% of his passes. Just absolutely absurd what that guy is doing right now this season. So two teams that I think are starting to play their best football. Two best teams, in my opinion, in the Big Ten. Insane environment, night game. You know, sometimes these Big Ten games, and listen, I work for Fox Sports Radio. I have no say in what happens on the TV side. But listen, you know, I know a lot of the Big Ten games, that big noon window, have been early in the day. This is a night game. I am excited. And I'm going to do something that I very, very rarely do. I'm going to take the road favorite to win and cover. I hate taking road favorites. I think it's so much harder to win on the road in college football than people realize. But give me the Ohio State Buckeyes -3.5 as my best bet and my best pick in this game. Bottom line, when I look at this game, three things stand out from the Ohio State perspective, okay? One, like I said, got to give Ryan Day credit. Now, listen, there's an argument to be made of, how many coaches, if they had a $20 million NIL budget, could put together the roster Ryan Day has. I don't know. Could put together the coaching staff that Ryan Day has with the money and resources Ohio State has. I don't know. But he did it, and he shouldn't be criticized for the fact that, again, this is a complete team. Will Howard's kind of pulling all the right strings. And Ryan Day, I think he looks, even just listening to him in press conferences, I think he looks more poised, confident in his team and his team's ability. And I do wonder if the hands-off of the day-to-day of game planning and putting together an offensive whatever is really having a positive. I can't discredit Ryan Day, a guy I've been critical of because he's put together a roster, a great roster. More importantly than that, though, here's the real reason why I like Ohio State in this game. Two reasons. First off, it was funny. I was talking to Dom, who runs our Torres on Ohio State account. Dom is an Ohio State student on campus, does an amazing job. I was talking to him the other day, and I said, for all the talk about all the players that were added in the portal, Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, Will Howard, whoever, I think the biggest addition this offseason has been Chip Kelly, okay? Because what was the blind spot with this team? What was the weakness in Ryan Day and what he did? It was that they didn't always run the ball effectively and that the O-line was not always great. Now, look, I know that even Ryan Day said this week that the O-line has another level to get to, and this Oregon defensive front is certainly going to give them fits. But let's also acknowledge this. It's not like you could say Ohio State hasn't played anybody. That Iowa defense last week, top 10 in the country in basically every category, top 10 in rush defense coming in. They hadn't given up a touchdown on the first possession of the game in 2 years. Ohio State goes down and scores on the opening drive. And so because of it, you can't say that this Ohio State offensive line is untested, but I think the biggest addition has been Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly has he has the most talent he's probably had since Oregon, or, he's coached in the NFL, but he's had as much talent as he has. And I just love the way he has put together this offense. Everybody's touching the ball. It's almost like in basketball, when you got 5 guys on the court that can score, it's like, who do you guard? Who do you defend? You used to hear people say it about the UConn Huskies last year. Like, how do you stop this team when all 5 guys can beat you? That's kind of Ohio State. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson are sharing the rock, running the ball. It was interesting listening to the Iowa game. Gary Danielson said they met with Judkins, and he said, part of the reason I came to Ohio State, I didn't want to carry the ball 30 times. So both those guys are fresh. Travion Henderson is healthy. And then you're getting the ball to Emeka Ibuka. You're getting the ball to Jeremiah Smith. I just really like this team. Finally, I said it earlier, the defense, I don't think Ohio State's – I think because – let me rephrase. I think because Chip Kelly and the offense have been so awesome, we just take for granted what Jim Knowles has done with this defense. They were USC under Lincoln Riley before DeAnton Lynn prior to Jim Knowles' arrival. Well, guess what happens? He comes in. The defense has gotten better every year. They return a bunch of guys this year. They add Caleb Downs. Now they're number one defense in college football. This is obviously the most potent offense that they have seen, but this is a defense that through 5 games is giving up, how about this, 200 yards per game, only 129 through the air. And so Dylan Gabriel, I like him, but listen, respectful of that Oregon receiver core. I watched him against Michigan State last week. Michigan State had chances in that game and could not take advantage. Same Michigan State team, by the way, that Ohio State blew out 2-3 weeks ago. So when I look at this game, I just see an Ohio State team that is operating at about the highest level on offense, on defense. Special team speaks for itself. Give me Ohio State, the Ohio State. Although I guess you can do the O for both schools. I don't know. But that O was for Ohio State. I'll say Ohio State 24-17 Ohio State wins. I like them outright to win this game. I like them to cover the 3.5. Like I said, do not love betting road favorites, especially in huge games like this, but I do like Ohio State. Let's keep it going. By the way, recording a little earlier. Drop your comments in the comment section. Curious to hear your thoughts on this game. We have to go to beautiful Dallas, Texas, the Cotton Bowl, baby. How about this? Texas, Oklahoma. We still call it the Red River Shootout on this show, okay? There's no political correctness here. I swear, I yell, I scream, whatever. We call it the Red River Shootout. Texas, a 14.5-point favorite. The over-under set at 50.5 in this game. Unbelievable matchup. Interesting matchup. And really a matchup where in some ways we know these teams really well, in some ways we don't. Texas, we kind of know the deal, right? Texas, how about this, by the way? The rare that team has the rare double that team has no weakness week this week, right? Dan Lanning said it about Ohio State, and Brent Venables said it about Texas. And you look at Texas, and listen, we'll get to the Quinn Ewers element of things in a minute. Against most teams, maybe Oklahoma is one of the exceptions. Doesn't really matter who plays at quarterback. And Venables talked about this. He said of the 22 players on their 2 deep, 21 of them are juniors or seniors. So they're old. The O-line has like 120 starts between them. The D-line or the defense has dudes everywhere. They're flying everywhere. It's a top 10 defense in the country, one of the best defenses in the SEC. And I know that Texas largely has not been tested. Colorado State's not good. Michigan does not have a quarterback, as we've learned. UL Monroe, Mississippi State, I understand that they're not tested, but you look at this team. They have been awesome across the board. Now, I think to me, and I think to everybody, the big question is, what is the situation with Quinn Ewers, okay? Because now, to Sark's credit, he said Quinn Ewers, as of right now, is starting. Like, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not going to do any coach speak nonsense. We expect him to play, and we hope he plays well. But the word monitor was also used during Steve Sarkisian's availability. And the one thing I keep going back to in this game, oblique injuries are ones that, and we talked about this at the time. Remember, I told you the day that Arch came in, I said, Quinn Ewers is not playing against UL Monroe. He's not playing against Mississippi State. They go into a bye. He's going to get 3 full weeks before he plays against Oklahoma. And the reason I said that is because of the fact that oblique injuries are one where you can be healthy, you can be healthy, you can be healthy, you can be healthy. And then you just twist the wrong way. You turn the wrong way, you injure it, and you're back on the injured list and you're back at square one. So I've always felt like this was the game Quinn Ewers would come back. But even Steve Sarkisian is basically acknowledging, like, I don't really know what the heck is going on with my guy. And we will see what happens with him coming into this game. From the Oklahoma perspective, again, you kind of know what this team is. Like, you know, by the way, even coming into the year, we knew the O-line was super inexperienced. Jackson Arnold was a super inexperienced quarterback. But I bring it up because we're now like 5 games into the season, okay? And so it's important to note Jackson Arnold is out. Michael Hawkins is in. The O-line is still struggling. Now, to Oklahoma's credit, they seem to be committed to Michael Hawkins, at least for now. But also the defense is still playing really well. We discussed it going into the Auburn game. Number 2 in the SEC in tackles for loss per game. Number 2 in sacks per game. That defense is taking on the Brent Venables kind of mindset and thought process. How about this from this defense? They are playing at a really high level, and they're playing well. Although I should mention, and I think this is important as we start to analyze this game, is that defense was not very good against Auburn, gave up almost 500 yards of total offense. So I guess the point that I was trying to make before I got sidetracked, it is a Brent Venables defense, super aggressive. That is where they're putting their resources in NIL. If you follow recruiting at all, improved, healthy, all that. But I guess we just don't know what we're going to get from the offense. Speaking of which, that is why I'm ready to make a best bet. And I am ready to say this. I just said we don't know what we're going to get from Oklahoma's offense. We're not totally sure that Quinn Ewers is 100% healthy. So go ahead and give me the under of 50.5 in this game. And no, I do not feel good about that, only because, as we all know, this is a game we've had some 55 to 45 scores, stuff like that. So listen, if it ends up being over in the first quarter, don't be totally surprised because Torres is an idiot. But I do like the under in this game, and it's for a couple pretty simple reasons. I mean, first of all, I don't feel good picking either side in this game. Okay, and I'll explain why. From the Texas perspective, listen, you could talk yourself into a Texas blowout. You could talk yourself into a Texas outright loss, right? From the Texas perspective, think about it. The blowout scenario. Michael Hawkins Jr. doesn't really throw the football. Can't really make plays with his feet. That O-line is now going up against an elite D-line. They can't block. Texas is in the backfield. Quinn Ewers is back healthy. Blowout city, 38-3 victory, okay? You can see that scenario. You can also see the other scenario. Quinn Ewers isn't 100%. They ease him back in. That Oklahoma defense is flying around. They're a little bit healthy. Texas really hasn't played anybody except Michigan, and that was 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. 4 of their 5 games at home. Is there a scenario where even if Texas wins, it's 24-21? Like, yes, I can see that scenario. Same time, Oklahoma, it's kind of the same deal, right? They're committed to Michael Hawkins. Can he break a few plays? Does that defense fly around? Can they be in position late to win that game? I'm not saying it will happen, but I could see the scenario. Also, let's keep talking about this game. Defense is really good. Oklahoma's more battle tested. Already played Tennessee, Auburn on the road. So again, there's a scenario I could see this game being close late into the fourth quarter. It's also worth noting, by the way, 9 of the last 10 Red River games have been decided by a score or less. So the idea that history tells us that Texas, even in a game where they are favored by a lot, is going to win by a lot, history just doesn't tell us that. Only game that's been decided by more than one score. Remember, it was the game 2 years ago? Sorry, I'm looking up at the sky trying to think here. 2 years ago, it was Venables' first season. Dillon Gabriel gets hurt the week before against TCU. They're down to a third-string quarterback. Only one that was a blowout. Every other one is competitive. So I see the scenario where I think it's competitive. I would lean Oklahoma plus 14.5, but to me, the best bet is the under 50.5, because when I look at this bet, what I see is a situation where I think both coaches kind of keep it close to the vest, right? Texas, you don't want to get Quinn Ewers hurt. I know that people have joked and complained about how easy this Texas schedule is, but at the same time, you still got some tough games ahead starting next week against Georgia. So if you can keep Quinn Ewers in the pocket, if you cannot put too much on tape, if you can set up a scenario where you get him through this game healthy, I think you got to go ahead and do it. From the Oklahoma perspective, I think the defense is still the strong point. I could see them creating chaos. I could see them making plays. But also, if they're in a close game, they're going to try to keep the ball out of Michael Hawkins' hands. Run game, defense, rely on ball control. So I just don't see a lot of points in this game. I will say that Texas wins the game 24 to I'll say 28-10, okay? 28-10 is my official Texas best bet. That would be a Texas cover, but I just feel much better taking the under. And by the way, of all the bets this week, it's the one that I feel least confident about. But you guys are going to be mad at me if I don't make a pick. So I'll say Texas wins 28-10. I don't feel great about it, but I do think the under comes into play in this game. All right, so what we're going to do, take a quick break, come back. When we come back, we're going to stay in the SEC, another marquee matchup, Ole Miss-LSU. Plus, we'll talk about another marquee matchup in the Big Ten, Penn State, USC, Colorado, Kansas State, maybe even a little bit on Tennessee and Florida. Take a quick break. Be right back. Let's go. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions @gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So let's go ahead and get to another top 25 matchup in the SEC. And I'll be transparent. I'm as interested in this game as Oklahoma, Texas, as whoever. Maybe not Oregon, Ohio State, because that one is going to be a barn burner. But this is a good one. Ole Miss traveling to LSU. How about this? Ole Miss, the 3.5-point road favorite. The over-under set at 63.5. Worth noting coming into this one, Ole Miss has not won at LSU since 2008. Okay, it's been a minute, but Lane Kiffin has a really good team. Let's go ahead and dive in. From the Ole Miss perspective, listen, a couple thoughts here. Very nice win against South Carolina last week. Listen, I was critical of Ole Miss after that Kentucky game. How good are they? This and that. Well, they came in, they took control of that South Carolina game and completely dominated, especially on the defensive end for the Rebels, okay? So for Ole Miss, you come off that Kentucky loss where people are kind of questioning your toughness, they pushed you around, whatever. How about this from Ole Miss? Finish the game giving up 3 points. You keep South Carolina in the end zone. You force 2 turnovers, 162 yards passing. Now, listen, South Carolina did rush for 151 yards, but it came on 43 carries. So it's just a scenario where Ole Miss, to me, is probably, because the Kentucky loss was so shocking, we all kind of sold all of our Ole Miss stock. You want to sell your Ole Miss stock to me, I'll go ahead and take it because I like them a lot. And it's not even necessarily for the reason that you think, okay? First off, we know Jackson Dart is really good. Jackson Dart actually has not been playing well the last 2 games. He's only completing 59% of his passes in SEC play. That's a little bit concerning, this and that. But that Ole Miss defense is for real. And what was the conversation everywhere in college football over the last about 12 months? Well, Ole Miss, we know they can score. We know Lane Kiffin can call plays. The offense is amazing, blah, 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 this and that. But what was the big concern? Do they have enough dudes on defense? They went heavy in the portal on defense, especially a defensive line, Walter Nolan, the kid from Florida. That defense has been phenomenal. Now, statistically, their numbers are a little skewed because they have played 6 games. They have not played a bye yet, but they lead the SEC in sacks. They lead the SEC in TFLs. So whatever money was spent on the defensive line in the portal, it has been worth every penny because that defense is playing at a really high level. And it frankly carried them last week when the offense was, I don't even want to say struggling. I think Ole Miss just kind of went conservative because they knew they could rely on the defense. Really like Ole Miss. LSU, I'll tell you this, man. I think LSU, this is a sort of important game for them. And I think it's a game where we're going to learn a lot about LSU. Like LSU is just in such a weird spot. I remember talking about this with Trey Wallace from Outkick before the season, where I told him, I said, what's the vibe at LSU? Because you think about LSU football, and it's this weird thing where, you think about LSU, it's like, well, there's some positives. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. Offense was awesome. This was coming into the year, of course. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, but then the defense was bad. Recruiting is good, but there's not much excitement about this year. And you look at LSU and just look at this season. Now, to the credit of Brian Kelly, this team does get better over the course of the year under his watch, but this is the third straight year they lost a marquee game to open the season. You lose to USC. But then the counter to that is even after that, you're 4-1. Congrats. I don't know that LSU's look very good, right? Struggled against South Carolina. Now, I understand South Carolina going there on the road is not easy. Well, one, Ole Miss made it look easy. Two, you could have lost that game if Lenore Sellers doesn't get hurt. If they don't lose their starting quarterback, you might have lost that game if you were LSU. So to me, I don't know how good they are. By the way, UCLA, a few weeks later, UCLA is getting destroyed they got destroyed by Oregon. They got destroyed by Penn State. They got destroyed by Indiana. They were in the game at LSU before LSU pulled away late. So I look at LSU. This is a marquee game for me in terms of who they are going to be this season. And we said it with Ryan Day a minute ago. I don't think Brian Kelly would be on the hot seat, but you lose this game at home. All of a sudden, Alabama looks a lot different for LSU. All of a sudden, you got to go to A&M, a place that you lost 2 years ago. Arkansas is not an easy place to play, as the Tennessee Volunteers found out. And then, of course, by the way, Oklahoma to close the year is a very good team as well. So LSU, this is, I don't want to say must win, but it's kind of like if you don't win this, you start to kind of question what this season will become. And so with it, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to give you my best bet. Then I'll give you my actual pick for this game. But let's start with the best bet. The best bet to me, and this is my best bet of the week, it is the under of 63.5. Now, that is down a little bit from 64.5, but I put this out on Twitter on Monday. I said last week I felt like the Arkansas-Tennessee over-under total was off by like 15 points. I said it was 60.5. I felt like it should be about 45. I thought it was like a 24-21 game. It ended up being even lower. It was 19-14 was the final score. So the way I felt about Tennessee, Arkansas, that's the way I feel about this game. I think this line is off by about 15 points. It is my favorite bet of the week. I feel very confident. Let me explain why. From the Ole Miss perspective, like I said, Jackson Dart has not been playing well on the road, or has not been playing well since SEC play started. Right now, he's completing 59% of his passes in SEC play, compared to 76% in the non-conference portion of the schedule. Now, the non-con was pretty easy, but it doesn't change the fact that Jackson Dart is struggling. So if he's struggling, what do? Take the ball out of his hands. Rely on that defense, especially in a loud environment, a crazy environment, and an environment that is so tough to play in. And as we said off the top, that Ole Miss has never won in under Lane Kiffin, or really under like their last three coaches. I think the last coach to win at LSU as the Ole Miss head coach was Houston Nutt, if I'm not mistaken, in 2008. So it shows you how long it's been. And I don't think, Lane Kiffin, listen, I think there's this perception of Lane Kiffin. He doesn't have an ego. If he's got to win 20-7, he'll do it. That's what he did against South Carolina last week. Took the foot off the gas, wasn't worried about putting up the most points, just getting the win. So you look at Ole Miss. It's also worth noting, by the way, after this game, they get a bye. You don't got to win pretty. You just want to win. From the counter perspective with LSU, I'm just going to say it. I'll get crushed in the comments, when we post this clip by LSU fans. I don't think LSU is very good. I'll just be transparent. I don't see a lot of special when I watch LSU, okay? And the one thing about LSU, they had highs and they certainly had lows under Les Miles and Ed Orgeron. But nobody ever questioned when you turn on the tape, oh, that whole team is NFL dudes, right? You watch NFL football. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyrann Mathieu still balling, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels. You go on and on down the list, just special guys all over the field. I don't see that with LSU. As a matter of fact, it goes back to what we said in the preseason. I said Jaden Daniels, everyone was complaining last year when Jaden Daniels wins the Heisman Trophy on a 9-3 team. I said that team would be 6-6 without Jaden Daniels. Well, look at LSU now with Garrett Nussmeier. They're struggling to run the football, 96th nationally in running the football. You look at their ability on defense, it's improving, but 66th in the country. Yes, it's a significant improvement from last year, and Blake Baker deserves a ton of credit. Some of it also might be the schedule that they've played. I mean, South Carolina and UCLA aren't exactly a who's who of elite offenses. And so when I watch LSU, I've said it before, and I'll get criticized. I don't see special. I see one really good receiver in Kyron Lacy. I see a spectacular, maybe the best tight end in college football in Mason Taylor. I keep getting told how great the O-line is. They can't block anybody from when I watch them. I think they got like one dude on defense. The Braden Swinson kid's really good. No special DBs. Unfortunately, we know that Harold Perkins is hurt. And I think, look, I think they're going to struggle significantly to move the football against Ole Miss. So my best bet is the under here of 63.5, and I feel great about it. Now, I know what people are going to say because my buddy Ryan Coyle, who hosts radio in Philadelphia, tweeted me this. But he said, dude, last year it was like 56-49. Yeah, Jaden Daniels ain't walking through that door, okay? And Lane Kiffin is not going to even attempt to make this a shootout on the road. Listen, I don't feel comfortable. I'll be honest. I don't love betting on Ole Miss in a place that they haven't won in close to 20 years. But to me, I feel good about the under. By the way, producer Matt with some great work. He does confirm 08. Jevin Sneed, unfortunately, I believe do I say it? I think he's the late Jevin Sneed, 274 yards passing, 2 touchdowns for Ole Miss in that game. And so you listen, we all know it is a very, very, very tough place to play. It is a very tough place to play. I don't love betting either side. I would pick Ole Miss to win. If you held a gun to my head, please don't. But if you held a gun to my head, I would take Ole Miss to win that game. But I really just like the under. Would it shock me if it's a weird 1917 LSU voodoo? They figure out a way to win? Sure. But I don't think LSU's good. I really don't. By the way, they're playing Arkansas next week. I wouldn't be stunned if we get a healthy Taylon Green. I wouldn't be stunned if Arkansas is a favorite. We can discuss that one down the road. Give me the under of 63.5. It's my favorite bet. Let's keep it going. Couple more before we get out of here. I got to wrap this show here in a little bit because I got some commitments for the afternoon. But let's talk another one. It's not quite a top 25 matchup, and we'll get to why in a second. But USC hosting Penn State, another great helmet game. Feels like it should be a Rose Bowl from 1982 with Todd Blackledge and whoever, John Robinson, or who was the whatever coach of the USC Trojans at the time. This game's at the Coliseum. It is a Big Ten game. Penn State, the 4.5-point road favorite, the over-under set at 50.5. Look at this game. First off, USC, why are they not ranked? It's because they lost to Minnesota. And it was a weird game. We talked about this a lot on last week's show. We talked a lot about this on the Sunday show with the Alabama and Vandy game, where even when Alabama was down, you just kind of felt like they were going to come back and find a way to win. And that was just kind of how I felt about USC in this game. Is a game where, they jump out to a 7-3 lead. It's 10-10. They're up 17-10. Minnesota scores the touchdown late in the game to take it was just a strange game. And it was a game that I think it was a pseudo turning point for the entire season because you can brush off the Michigan game a few weeks ago, couple tough plays, couple this, couple that. USC goes to Minnesota. Now you've lost back-to-back Big Ten road games to start your tenure. Now, I think there's people back again questioning Lincoln Riley. The Lincoln Riley roller coaster this year has been interesting to watch. He went from being the worst coach in the world, Paul Feinbaum was ready to replace him with Deion Sanders, to he's great again after he beats LSU, to he stinks again after Michigan, to he's okay again after Wisconsin. Now he's back to being terrible. Listen, this is a flawed team, but they can move the football. They can throw the football, certainly. And in the two wins that the two losses that they have, they've outgained the opponent. By the way, it's worth noting with Minnesota. Like, Minnesota's actually a pretty legitimate defense here. You coming into this weekend, Minnesota obviously is on a bye, but Minnesota's the 6th-ranked defense in all of college football. So, like, we want to minimize that loss. I'm not saying it was good, but it might not be quite as bad as we think. Penn State, other hand, very interesting team. First of all, the big story coming out of Penn State this week, James Franklin wants a new, I just yelled into the mic, I apologize, but James Franklin wants a new freaking airport in Happy Valley, okay? Did you see this story? He's basically just like, dude, we got to drive an hour just to get on a plane, just to this, just to that. He's like, we got to get ourselves an airport near this campus. But it shows you this is the new world of the Big Ten. By the way, I saw this stat as it pertained to the Oregon-Ohio State game. I didn't mention it. Obviously, I picked Ohio State to win that game. But it sounds like Big Ten teams are 1-8 outright in games where they have to travel 2 time zones in that game. So as an example, when Washington traveled to Rutgers, they ended up losing that game. When Michigan traveled to Washington, they lost that game. So that's kind of an interesting stat. And from Penn State's side of things, I'll just say it is going to be fascinating to just see who they are, right? Because, listen, my stance on Penn State is pretty clear. I don't love them. They win the games they're supposed to. They don't win the games they're supposed to late. They lose to Ohio State and Michigan consistently. It's just, I need to see something that proves to me that that's not who they are. Saw another stat on Penn State, by the way. How about this? Last 3 seasons, they have started 5-0 in each of those 3 seasons. Only 13-11 after those games. Now, to be fair to Penn State, one of those years, their starting quarterback got hurt, Sean Clifford. They kind of fell apart. Last year, they went 10-2, 11-3 with the 10-3 with the bowl game. But 10-2, 2 losses to Michigan, Ohio State. They've struggled against elite teams. Not saying USC is that, but this is kind of the game, right? You've done what you've done all September, all October. Now it's time to show, like, are you the team that you claim you are? Everybody keeps telling me that no team is in a more advantageous spot to make the playoff than Penn State, right? That was a big narrative in the preseason of, no team benefits from an expanded playoff more than Penn State. Ohio State, Michigan, doesn't matter if you finish in 3rd. Well, you still got to finish in 3rd in a much tougher league. You got to play USC this weekend. And I'll be honest, I'm just going to say it. I'm calling for the upset. I'm calling for USC to win outright. Also, certainly cover the 4.5 points in this game. And so when I look at this game, a couple things stand out. One, USC, I'm sorry. I know Lincoln Riley's an easy target. I know everybody hates Lincoln Riley, and he's the worst human being that's ever walked the face of the earth. I'm not excusing a loss to Minnesota, but at the same time, couple things. Those 2 losses, 2 plays away from being a completely different game. I know you could say that about a lot of teams in a lot of games, but look at those losses. Against Michigan in that game, Michigan had 3 big runs. They couldn't do anything else. Miller Moss throws a pick 6, and Michigan still has to complete a 3rd and long and a 4th and 1 on the goal line to actually beat USC. USC stops either of those runs, they probably win that game. Last week against Minnesota, they lose that game, but they outgained Minnesota 7 of 11 on 3rd downs, 6 yards per carry against one of the best rushing defenses in college football, and 3 turnovers cost them the game. Well, they're back at home. They are certainly more battle-tested. One thing, you can criticize USC all you want, but listen, this is a team that, again, Minnesota, I don't think people realize. Minnesota is a top 10 defense, okay? Michigan is struggling a little bit right now, but they're about a top 30 defense. Wisconsin, about a top 30 defense. Tell me who Penn State has played, okay? Specifically on the offensive side of the football. Now, I'm not saying this is peak Lincoln Riley with Kyler Murray where they're putting up 50 points a game, But here are Penn State's wins this season: West Virginia, Kent State, Illinois, UCLA, and Bowling Green. West Virginia is the best offense they played, 38. They're 38th in the country. Well, keep in mind, that was a rainy, stormy, lightning-delayed game with a lot of bad weather. Kent State, 134th in total offense in the country. That's dead last. Illinois, 100th in the country in total offense. UCLA, 127th in the country in total offense. And oh, by the way, Bowling Green is 67th in the country in total offense. And you couldn't get them off the field. They put up 27 points against you. So I look at USC again. I think one of the reasons, now nobody has all the answers in picking games. If they did, everybody would be undefeated and Vegas casinos would be bankrupt. Okay. But I think too often we react to the last thing that we saw and not the bigger picture. I think USC is probably somewhere between like the 12th and 20th best team in the country. Not excusing a loss to Minnesota, not excusing a loss to Michigan, not saying that those aren't games that they could have or maybe should have won. But we're all focused on, well, they just lost at Minnesota. Yeah, and Minnesota needed to convert a 4th down late in the game on the goal line to win the game. So I don't know why I'm yelling and screaming, but I'm fired up about this one. And by the way, Penn State, James Franklin, prove me wrong, bro. Like, prove to me that you can win a game that you're not supposed to. And I think it's just going to be an interesting kind of, what's the right word? A culture clash, really. Penn State, like, at some point, you're going to have to prove that you can't just rely on your defense in a big game, because that's been the problem with them against Michigan, against Ohio State. They want to win every game 10-3. Well, USC is going to put up points. Are you going to be able to move the ball against this improved USC defense? I like USC to win this game. I'm going to say 27-13. I think it's a big game. I think USC wins outright. I think they get the win. Really quickly, I wish I could talk more about this game because it is an important game, but I hate to say it, I got to run. Colorado, how about them Buffs hosting Kansas State? The line in this game, Kansas State opened as a 5.5-point favorite. It is down to 4.5. The over-under set at 56.5 in this game. And it's funny because I'll tell you this. This is going to sound crazy. People are going to get mad. I think you can argue in terms of the significance of this game on the entire season that this is the most important game of the weekend. That sounds crazy. You're going to say, Torres, you're out of your mind. You're going to say, Torres, you've been drinking that Coach Prime Kool-Aid and you need to calm down. Here's why it is, in my opinion, arguably the most important game of this weekend. Oregon, Ohio State. Whoever loses, they're still going to have a very clear pathway back to the Big Ten championship game, back to the number 1 seed. Texas, Oklahoma. If Texas loses, guess what? You get Georgia next week. You beat Georgia. Everybody forgets what happens against Oklahoma. USC-Penn State. Penn State loses. You got Ohio State in a few weeks. Go prove us wrong there. This is why this game is consequential. Kansas State was the preseason favorite to win the Big 12. They already have one Big 12 loss. They easily could have lost a second game on the road this season. And the Big 12 is probably going to be a one-bid league. You lose this game to start 1-2 in Big 12 play, you could be in big-time trouble. And then there's the Colorado perspective. We've talked about Colorado, but they're 4-1, 2-0 in the Big 12. You win this game, Colorado, there is, I'm just telling you, a very clear pathway to the Big 12 championship game. You have Arizona next week. Arizona is a mess under Brent Brennan. You get Cincinnati at home, Utah at home. I don't even know what Utah is. Maybe Cam Rising will be healthy by then. Maybe they won't be. Oklahoma State's a mess. Kansas is a mess, 0-3 in the Big 12. Texas Tech is really tough. Not going to lie. But I think if you win this game, there are 2 games the rest of the year where you're not favored. At Texas Tech and Utah at home if Cam Rising is healthy. And I don't think there's a single game that you cannot win. And so when we talk about this game, this is what it's going to come down to. A couple things. One, we got to give credit where it's due. That Colorado defense specifically, and the Colorado run defense to me has been really good. Now look, you can't quantify it necessarily with a statistic, okay? And the reason you can't quantify it is because in week 1, they did struggle against North Dakota State. And then 2 weeks ago against UCF rushed for 177 yards on the ground. And so you sit there and say, well, how good is the defense? Well, UCF, was averaging 300 75 yards on the ground per game. So they held them to less than half their average. And it was just a great, great, great effort by Colorado in that game. Kansas State certainly wants to run the ball. Kansas State has been effective running the ball. Can you slow down that run offense? And here's the other part. Can you make Avery Johnson beat you with his arm? Listen, I got to give Avery Johnson credit. Avery Johnson is the Kansas State quarterback. He is a guy that I did not believe coming into this year. He was really good 2 weeks ago against Oklahoma State. 3 touchdowns, 259 yards passing. But here are his stats on the road. Against BYU, 15 of 28, 130 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Against Tulane, 15 of 23, 181 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, no INTs. So from Colorado's perspective, if they want to win this game, it's going to come down to 2 things. One, can you stop the run, or can you at least slow it down with Avery Johnson at quarterback? But then 2, on the offensive side of the football, here's the big question, and I am excited to see the answer to this one. Can you run the ball enough to keep that defense honest with Shedeur Sanders? Because here's the bottom line about Kansas State, okay? Their strengths and weaknesses are pretty clear on defense. They stop the run at a very effective rate. They are currently 16th in the country in rush defense, number 2 in the Big 12, behind UCF. They're 110th in pass defense, okay? And so you look at this game, go back to that Tulane game that I mentioned a minute ago. They ended up winning that game 34-27. Tulane finished with 342 yards of total offense. Now, with respect to Tulane's quarterback in that game, he ain't Shedeur Sanders. Sorry, Darian Mensah, if you're watching this show, I'm sure you're a great kid. You ain't Shedeur, okay? And that's not disrespect. It's just a fact. But Shedeur is balling. Brock Heward said it in the UCF game. The Colorado receiver corps, Texas and Ohio State probably have more pure NFL guys, which, by the way, when you recruit like Texas and Ohio State, you should. But in terms of dudes that can make plays at the college level, Colorado has as many as anybody. And so because of it, I'm doing it again, baby. I'm drinking the Coach Prime Kool-Aid. Give me Colorado to win, and give me Colorado to cover the 4.5. Listen, Kansas State, great program, whatever. They've struggled on the road. It's just the truth. Should have lost to Tulane, could have lost to Kansas State. Colorado, criticize Coach Prime for whatever you want. The offensive line is blocking well. The run game has been as good as it's been. The run game doesn't need to be great in this game. It just needs to be good enough where Shedeur has enough time to find those receivers and Shedeur has enough time to make plays. The money is coming in on Colorado. I don't think it's just because they're a public team. I think this is a good matchup for them. Give me Colorado to win. Give me Colorado to cover. I like the Buffs. Tell you what, I got to run here. There are a couple other intriguing games that we're not going to have a chance to get to. Florida, I got to give them credit, man. Listen, Billy Napier, I said it on this show. I said I really thought, and I've been told that there was a scenario if Billy Napier got embarrassed by UCF that he could potentially be fired last week. Okay, they beat UCF. It wasn't pretty in the second half, but they take care of business. And as far as this game, open at 17.5, it's down to 15.5. I think Vegas thinks that Florida can keep it competitive. And the big question obviously is Josh Heupel going to let Nico loose? Because he's been tight, he's been conservative, he's been this, he's been that. I don't know. Total stay away to me. I tend to take Tennessee. Don't feel great about it. Josh Heupel, at some point, it's like, dude, you're paying, like, I hate to be a jerk like this, but you're paying Nico an insane amount of money. Let him loose. Let him make mistakes. Let him make plays. So we'll see with that game. There was one other one that I'm very intrigued by. Okay, so this isn't the sexiest game, but you want a best bet, I'll give you one. I actually like Iowa. They are hosting Washington. They are a 2.5-point favorite. I like Iowa to win that game and cover. If you watch the Washington-Michigan game, Washington was lucky to survive. And I think Iowa's going to bounce back and win. We just shared the stat about teams traveling 2 time zones in the Big Ten. That's certainly a factor. Looking at the chat really quick, Robert Kaufman said, Minnesota is not a top 10 defense or anything else. Well, Robert, listen, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, okay? Minnesota, the 6th-ranked defense with allowing 251 yards per game. That's ahead of Oregon. That's ahead of Ole Miss. That's ahead of Nebraska. That's ahead of Missouri. That's ahead of Utah. That's ahead of Miami. That's ahead of Notre Dame. That's ahead of South Carolina. That's ahead of Georgia. I mean, do you want me to just make stuff up? They are a top 10 defense. And also, to their credit, Minnesota does a pretty good job against the pass as well, as we saw this week. Minnesota, the number 1 pass defense in college football. All right, I'll tell you what, do got to get out of here. Want to thank you for listening to this hybrid episode of the Aaron Torres Pod College Football Betting Show. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod to College Football Betting, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcast, make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure to rate and review the show. Give me a quick 5 stars. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All for today's show. It is time for me to get out of here. Truly do appreciate everybody's support. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, you F-head. Unblock me.